So just to remind you on the assessment that's associated with doing the case studies, your objective is to pick at least one and as many as two of the case studies in this series to write up a literature report. So pick one of these case studies and find a peer-reviewed research article that's related to the topic of that case study. Doesn't necessarily need to be the research presented actually in the case study talk, but it has to be obvious in terms of its relationship with the themes of that talk. The report is pretty short. We're only looking for about 400 words, but do read the instructions associated with the case study assessment because there are key things that you do need to do in order to get top marks. So you have 1 week from when the case study lecture is released, midnight on Sunday, and you need to have your case study report in by the following midnight of the following Sunday, so 7 days. It's my great pleasure to introduce this week's case study. It's done by Dan Noble, who's from the Division of Ecology and Evolution at the Australian National University in Canberra. Now, Dan is an early career researcher, but was quickly offered a plum faculty position at the Australian National University after his postdoctoral research at UNSW. And this is because Dan is an exceptional scientist. He is already one of Australia's leading evolutionary ecologists. Dan's interests are pretty broad and very integrated. A lot of his work is centered on development and physiology, and he has this extraordinary talent for designing really advanced and very clever experimental work in the lab. In many cases, Dan also marries those studies with sophisticated quantitative statistical analyses of existing published research using a technique known as meta-analysis. But Dan has also investigated a host of questions revolving around animal behaviour, again in that general sphere of development and physiology. And in this week's case study, Dan is going to discuss some of that research on learning and foraging, and in an animal that perhaps many people wouldn't equate with an obvious one for investigating cognition. So over to Dan.